Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. With us now from Washington is Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah. And Senator Lee, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, it's expected the full Senate will vote this week on whether to approve an attack on Syria in the wake of alleged chemical weapons usage that killed hundreds there. You have come out in opposition to these strikes. Can you share with us how you plan to vote and why?
Yes, I plan to vote against this military intervention. I have yet to hear any explanation as to why this is necessary to protect American national security. We haven't been attacked. What we have been told is that we need to stay out of the Syrian civil war, and I agree with that. But it's inconsistent with the notion that we should stay out of the Syrian civil war to say, let's attack the Assad regime. And moreover, what they're promising to do, what they would like to do, is to degrade the Assad regime's ability to carry out subsequent chemical weapons attacks. But they can't promise us that their proposed course of action will make subsequent attacks any less likely than doing nothing. And so in light of that, I don't think we ought to be putting American blood and treasure on the line by doing something that can't even promise to give us what we want.
Earlier today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said his country will urge Syria to put its chemical weapons supply under international control if doing so would avert U.S. military action. Syria is said to be open to this. How do you view this move?
Well, if Syria were, in fact, willing to do this, I think it'd be fantastic. We would be able to avoid having to inject ourselves into this dangerous, bloody, protracted civil war. And we could also make the risk of a subsequent chemical weapons attack by the Assad regime that much less likely. We'll see whether they're willing to do it. But if they would do it, I think that would be fantastic.
Now, Secretary Kerry has been ambivalent over whether Barack Obama would ignore the legislative chamber if it were to reject an attack or strikes. He has a habit of acting unilaterally. Pat Buchanan told me recently that if the president starts a war without the approval of Congress, that it is an impeachable offense. As a constitutional lawyer, in your view, is Pat Buchanan right? And if the president does act unilaterally, how would you and other lawmakers hold him accountable?
Well, first of all, it would be a stunning act for the president to take military action after requesting authorization for that same act from Congress, and if Congress subsequently denied that authorization. But Kathleen, I generally don't answer questions about impeachment in the abstract, particularly since I serve in the Senate, and impeachment proceedings, if any, would have to begin in the House of Representatives.
And once again, Republicans remain divided on this issue, whether to approve strikes or not, with House leaders lending their support to strikes and a number of Republicans in both the House and the Senate, like you and Rand Paul, saying, hey, we don't support this. Why is the party split here once again, mostly along Tea Party lines?
Well, there is a group of us here in Washington who have been elected just within the last few years who feel strongly that the United States government has expanded beyond its originally intended boundaries for far too long, and that has cost us a lot in terms of American blood and treasure. And so we want to make sure that we don't get involved militarily, except where it's necessary to protect Americans, except where it's something that can be shown to make Americans safer if we take that action. And so there's a group of us here that doesn't want to do that in the absence of those circumstances, and we don't see those circumstances here.
Is it safe to say that the Republican Party is beginning to back away from its normally hawkish stance?
You know, I don't know that it is necessarily fair to put it in terms that have been used in past decades. We're dealing now with a different kind of military conflict. We're being asked to inject the United States into a military conflict that is essentially a call to involve us in a civil war within another country. And although we have faced somewhat similar calls for intervention in the past, this one's different, and we don't want to get involved in this one.
Now, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is threatening retaliation for a U.S. strike. And in an interview with Charlie Rose, he says, we here in the U.S. can expect everything. Is this a concern of yours, or is this nothing more than saber rattling?
Well, it is, of course, one of many things that we've got to consider in response to the president's request for approving military intervention in the Syrian civil war. The fact that you shouldn't just go and kick a hornet's nest and expect to be able to walk away casually without any repercussions is something that I think few people would dispute. And so, yeah, I do think that's one of many things we've got to take into account, and one of many reasons why we've got to take this very, very seriously before we go and involve ourselves directly in someone else's civil war.
And it seems the president has painted himself into a box, if you will, in terms of his handling of the Syrian crisis. What is your analysis of how he's handled things?
Well, first of all, I was really pleased that he chose to seek authorization from Congress before getting us involved in the Syrian civil war. I think that was a demonstration of statesmanship, and it was an acknowledgement of the fact that he ought not be doing these things all on his own, regardless of whether he can, regardless of whether he could do it and get away with it, regardless of how broadly he might view his commander-in-chief powers. The fact that he was willing to consult Congress and to invite us to weigh in, I think speaks well of his decision-making in this circumstance. I hope he will stick with that. And I hope that if or when Congress refuses to approve this military intervention in the Syrian civil war, that the president will respect that and choose not to go it alone, choose not to get involved without congressional authorization.
Do you think Congress will approve it or reject it? Which way are the winds blowing right now?
At this point, I don't think Congress will approve it. We've got conservative Republicans like me who are strongly against it. We've got liberal Democrats like my cousin Tom Udall from New Mexico who are strongly against it. And it cuts across party lines, and in both houses of Congress there are just a lot of people who are really concerned about this. And the American people are with us. The American people are saying enough is enough. And we can't see that we have any business getting involved in the Syrian civil war.
All right, Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah. As always, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kathleen.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.